Hello, everyone. There we go. That's better. Welcome to Canada. So happy that you're able to join us here today. Thank you to CCNet for organizing this amazing event. First off, I would like to thank the Lequanan people and also the Songi and Esquimalt nations and Wasanic people for welcoming us here on this beautiful land today. We are so grateful. My name is Jennifer White, and I come from the territories of Wabanaki and Wolastoqey, which is also known as the city of Fredericton in the province of New Brunswick on the east coast of Canada. I work for a national charity called the Nature Conservancy of Canada. Pictured on screen are the individuals who collaborated to develop this plenary presentation today. We represent some, but not all, of the organizations and individuals who have adopted the conservation standards and that are working together to increase conservation capacity and facilitate collaborative conservation in Canada. And so this is one story, or one chapter, if you will, of Canada's journey in adopting the conservation standards and helping to create a conservation standards community. So to help you get to know Canada, we have a few fun quiz questions about some of the things that you may or may not know about the Great White North. As the quiz questions come up, please raise your hand and make some noise. And I know this is a really quiet crowd here today, but I know you can do it when you have the correct answer, okay? So let's see how this goes. Quiz question number 1. Canada has the longest coastline in the world. Approximately, how long is it? Is it A, 56,000 kilometers? Is it B, 120,000 kilometers? Is it C, 243,000 kilometers? Or is it D, 588,000 kilometers? All right, I hear C and D. So, raise your hands for C. Okay, raise your hands for D. Okay, it looks like about the same. So let's see which one of you actually has the right answer. C! That's not bad, not bad. All right. Come on now, I'm not getting that detail. Quiz question number 2. In some provinces, doctors can prescribe this to encourage more time spent outside. Is it A, vitamin D? No? Okay. Is it B, a Parks Canada pass? Okay. Well, we'll see. That sounds silly. Is it C, sunglasses? Okay. Is it D, a UV protection shirt? All right, I hear A and I hear B. Who says A? Okay. Who says B? Well, the majority says B, but I think A makes more sense. But anyway, B is correct. Awesome. I can't believe that many people knew the answer to that question. That's amazing. All right. Quiz question number 3. Canada has more of these than the rest of the world combined. Is it A, trees? Ooh, trees. Yeah, trees. That's a good one. Is it B, donuts? Maybe. Is it C, lakes? Or is it D, snowmobiles? Wow. Okay.
All the above.
That is not an option, I'm sorry. Okay. So I heard A and I heard C. Who said A? Okay. 1. All right. Got C. But that seems logical to me too. All right, and then C. There was quite a few for C. Let's see here. Good job, C. Some of 9% of Canada's surface water is covered by fresh water. Good job. And the last quiz question this morning, or at least from me anyhow. What is a Timbit? Is it a little Canadian kid named Tin? Is it B, a bite-sized donut from a fast food restaurant chain named Tim Hortons? Is it C, a tiny hockey player? Or is it D, both B and C? Raise your hands. Okay, so a lot said B. Let's see. Where's the B's? Okay, yeah. Where's the C's? Yeah. Where's the D's? Okay, well that looks about even. Can I ask for you, you D's, how many of you have children that are in hockey in Canada? A few? Okay. You would have definitely got the answer right. That's why I asked that question. So. Yes, great job, great job. Do you feel like you know a little bit more about Canada now, at least about the important things? We hope that you found this quiz a little entertaining and insightful. As we move through the presentation, we hope that you will discover a small piece of the Canadian Standard story here in Canada. The Canadian Standard story is one of collaboration, adaptation, learning, flexibility, partnership, cultural values, funder support, success, failure, opportunity, and community.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see all your faces and to be here after all the anticipation, after such a long time of planning. So we would like to start today by telling you a story. Our story is an adaptation of the folktale Stone Soup. Stone Soup is the story of a community coming together and learning to share and work together for the benefit of all. And we thought this story was a good analogy for how individuals and organizations in Canada have come together to build conservation standards capacity in Canada through community and collaboration. So, if you'll bear with me for a minute, we'll just ask that you gather around and listen to our tale.
This curtain's a little problematic for our setup here. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a conservation planner named Sitka. Sitka worked with the Nature Conservancy of Canada, and she was a traveler. She loved walking from village to village and meeting the people who lived there. She wore sturdy boots and carried a bulging backpack. She didn't have much, but she always had enough. And her backpack was just the right size to hold it all. As she went from place to place, she noticed that everyone was working hard at conservation, but they weren't getting strong results. They were working independently and not speaking the same language, which made it hard for them to collaborate, be efficient, and learn from each other. One day, Sitka arrived at a new place and approached some villagers. "Excuse me, Do you know where I might find a community of conservation practitioners to help me with my project? The villagers were surprised by this question. We've been thinking about this too. We were all doing our best with the limited resources that we have, but we think our work could be even stronger. Sitka received a similar response from everyone she ran into. Another villager pointed out, everyone's using different terms for the same things. Objectives are often not being met, and we're not sharing lessons learned. Yeah, a second villager chimed in, how do we know what's working and what's not, and where to make changes if things aren't going well? A third villager spoke up. If we all come together and collaborate, we can improve all our conservation efforts by using the conservation standards. They all knew what they needed to do. They would work together to build a conservation standards community. Sitka opened her backpack and noisily dumped everything into the street. Along with her water bottle, binoculars, notebook, she had a big wooden spoon, a book of matches, and some very basic ingredients. A conservation standards manual, and her experiences and lessons learned as an early adopter of conservation standards in Canada. The villagers gathered around as she was assembling all of her stuff. They watched her reveal an enormous iron pot. Whoa! Where did that giant pot come from? The villagers exclaimed. Oh, it's a very special pot, Sitka replied as she gathered twigs and built a fire. My mentors in the Conservation Measures Partnership handed it down to me. I've always had a strong collaborative conservation community as long as I've had this pot. But we don't have anything to put in the pot, pointed out one villager. Sitka smiled and reached into a zippered pocket in her backpack and pulled out what appeared to be a very ordinary, small, round, gray stone. Oh, we have everything we have everything we need, she said. In fact, we have enough to build a conservation standards community to share with everyone in Canada. She tossed the stone into the pot with a bang. Before long, the water in the pot started to bubble. Sitka added her conservation standards manual and stirred with her big wooden spoon. She seasoned by sprinkling in her experiences and lessons learned. Soon, she had a little taste of what she was cooking. That's good, she said. But a conservation standards community is always stronger with some partners to share with and learn from. Parks Canada and the Canadian Wildlife Service stepped forward. Excuse us, sorry. We're also interested in using conservation standards in our work. We see how this could strengthen conservation outcomes in Canada. It's not much, but we are hosting internal training sessions to build capacity within our organizations. That's perfect, said Sitka. Throw it in the pot. Sitka stirred thoughtfully. You know, Indigenous peoples have been stewarding the lands, waters, and air of Turtle Island since time immemorial. Their voices and knowledge are essential for conservation to be successful here. Nature United approached the pot. We are working in partnership with nations and communities in Indigenous-led conservation and exploring healthy country planning as a tool to support their work. Thank you, said Sitka. Bring what you got and throw it in the pot. Eventually, the federal government came forward. Sorry for interrupting, but here's an unprecedented investment in conservation through the Canada Nature Fund and Enhanced Nature Legacy. Chop, 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 plop, 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 into the pot the money goes. Soon, it seemed that everyone in the village had something to add. Numerous organizations began hosting trainings. Sorry, it's not much, but we can all pitch in and co-host conservation standards opportunities and training opportunities and specialized workshops across the country. Numerous organizations. Private consultants and conservation coaches came forward to offer their services as well. We don't have much bias, but we can offer our coaching and facilitation services to help teams with their conservation standards projects. Sitka continued to stir the pot. It was now full and bubbling, with a delicious aroma wafting up to greet everyone in the village. Everyone gathered around to enjoy the community that they were building. No one had everything, but everyone had something to offer, and collectively, it was enough. Merci, Wolaliak. Thank you.
So we hope you enjoyed that skit, kind of bringing all of our ingredients together and working together here in Canada. It's a tough act to follow, but we thought we'd probably want to get into a little bit of the details of how that collaboration shaped the use of conservation standards here. And I expect some of our lessons learned are probably going to be quite familiar to the seasoned conservation standards users in the room, and that some of our themes that we're going to bring up, we've actually seen reflected in the rally sessions that are going to be happening. But coming together and sharing and connecting has definitely helped build momentum and gained a lot of interest in the conservation standards here in Canada. And having that shared common framework between us to build from and learn from has given us the opportunity to align our approaches and work better together, a little bit like the cartoon here on kind of coming together to effectively work. And as we work together, we gained experience in using the conservation standards, and then we've learned to embrace flexibility and have an adaptive spirit. So embracing flexibility, you've probably been in a situation like this, where the character here is saying, I'm seeing a pattern, but I just need to talk to 1,385 more people to be confident enough to make a decision. Kind of feeling like you just can't get to the next step within the cycle. So in Canada, we're practicing conservation across very diverse landscapes with very diverse realities, very diverse conservation actors and interest holders. And we also have several initiatives that are happening in Canada that are really trying to transform the way that we've been doing conservation. So moving away from single species approaches to these collective multi-partner plans that are ecosystem-based and theme-based. And when you're working with many partners, you have to keep things moving. So we learned very quickly to embrace flexibility and to not get stuck in the weeds, to not face paralysis by analysis like these guys here on the screen. And reality is, well, we're working with an adaptive management framework, so let's keep moving. We'll be back after all. So we do keep things moving. And we've learned to be fit for purpose. So that means tailoring the conservation standards to a specific project's context. So quickly we realized that not all steps and sub-steps are relevant for all scenarios. And we were really pleased to see that coming out of CMP with their CS Light cookbook, and look forward to further discussion about that at the rally. But beyond kind of tailoring where you start or what sub-steps you're starting, we've also had to balance being in several steps of the cycle at the same time. So one example is moving forward with targets, select priority targets. So you might have low-hanging fruits that you can go and start implementing, or the right expertise at the table to move forward with certain targets. And you'll come back for the other ones. Kind of like these species here, different approaches. You can have the opossum, she's got all her babies on her back, all those targets, the things she cares for to move across. Then you've got the black bear, she's grabbing her cub, moving it across the street, but knowing she'll be back for the others when she's ready. We're also learning to be flexible in our engagement and knowing who to engage and when to engage. One thing is very clear for us is that engagement is an ongoing process. It is within every step, and it is constantly evolving. It's been helpful for us to define clear roles right from the beginning. So we call this the blooming onion. You've probably seen something similar. This is from our Prince Edward Island priority place. Just really having the roles up front, being able to know what the involvement is, what the roles are. And your role might change within the life of a project, but having that for the entire project team to know what the different stones in the pot are that you're going to be contributing, but also to be able to effectively communicate that externally is very helpful. We also design workshops for key interest groups. Not everyone needs to be at every meeting. So you can keep things moving forward on certain parts of your projects, maybe key interest activities on specific targets and have your workshops designed specifically for that to keep those moving. And that's a great way to create subgroups and delegate when you're in big multi-partner projects. We also do targeted surveys, trying to get information any way that we can and in different ways. And doing targeted surveys lets us reach people that maybe wouldn't have been involved otherwise, and gets us information that we can use ahead of time. Maybe the core team can further develop and debrief after, or do that kind of tedious information gathering ahead of time and hit the workshop ready to hit the road and run. And just as everyone doesn't need to be at every meeting, not everyone needs to even know you're using the conservation standards. So we've learned that working with the conservation standards in the background can be both effective and sometimes actually quite necessary. So, and of course, it's important for the project leads to know the process and to know the conservation standards, but to be able to collectively make an impact on conservation, many project participants don't need to know the details or the fact that you're actually still applying the conservation standards. And we've heard from some of our independent Canadian consultants that when they've submitted proposals that specify the conservation standards, that they've heard from clients, not another framework. But when they go ahead and submit proposals and do the work applying the principles of the conservation standards, it's worked really well. So we're learning to use it in the background, but still being able to build those bridges between projects, within organizations, and across organizations. We also have an adaptive spirit. So we've seen adaptations, but we've also seen adaptations the way we teach the conservation standards within organizations. So we had PARCA, the Parks Canada beaver up here, and this is their logo. So Parks Canada weaves together elements of the healthy country planning and the conservation standards when they deliver training. So for example, it promotes the use of healthy country planning approach to targets, where the cultural targets and values are integrated with the biodiversity targets instead of separating them out through the services that ecosystems provide. And these aren't necessarily cultural targets developed with or by Indigenous communities, but it helps teams to consider human elements as inextricable parts of the ecosystem. We also have projects that are collectively going underway that are using healthy country planning or adaptations of healthy country planning happening right here now in Canada. One example of that is the Yukon South Beringia Priority Place. This is a multi-partner project which includes First Nations, federal and territorial governments, academics, not-for-profit organizations. And it was important when establishing that vision to recognize that cultural representation of the collective working there and of the area that is there. So their vision is up here on the screen, which reads, "Respect and uphold our sacred relationship with the natural world that maintains Yukon South Beringia's unique biocultural diversity." And you see that reflected in the way that they've identified their values, their targets. In Yukon South Beringia, they've identified 11 values. They're currently moving forward with the implementation of 3 of those values. So conserving ancestral stewardship responsibility, a cultural value directly alongside conserving riparian system and conserving Beringian steppe. And I've put their website up there if you want to go check them out. Oops. Working interculturally means really having to recognize that there are many different ways of seeing the world. In Canada, Elder Albert Marshall brought to the Western world the concept of Edo Optimum, which is a Mi'kmaq word for two-eyed seeing. And he would acknowledge that that came from his Mi'kmaq elders in Nova Scotia. And Edo Optimum refers to learning to see from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, and with the other eye with the strengths of Western knowledges and ways of knowing, and then learning to use both of those eyes together to benefit all. There's collaborative conservation work underway in Gaspoig, Southwest Nova Scotia, that applies this concept. So using both Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge, which includes the conservation standards, together. And the artwork that you see up on the screen is done by Melissa Labrador from Acadia First Nation, and it represents the Gaspoig Conservation Collaborative. But we're on a journey, and it's still an early journey, and it is definitely a learning journey to work together to achieve more for conservation in Canada. We are still seeking ways to be flexible, to adapt, to truly co-create conservation plans. And this journey, it's been challenging. And it continues to offer lots of learning opportunities for us as we work through conservation standards with diverse partners. And so, for instance, there's healthy skepticism around any adaptations of the conservation standards. Healthy country planning is seen as a Western approach. That doesn't mean that sometimes grabbing the conservation standards or healthy country planning it and kind of applying it off the shelf isn't exactly what a project team needs or wants to engage communities to get the funding rolling in. But more often than not, what we're learning from one project is that we still have a lot of learning and evolving to do as respectful partners in conservation, and as that conservation planning is continuing to take shape here in Canada. And so to talk a little bit about our challenges, I'm going to invite Sarah up, but just want to take a moment to say that we also had Charles Latrémouille, who couldn't be here today, an independent consultant kind of working with us on this, who was going to speak, but unfortunately isn't feeling well. But Sarah's stepping up and taking his place.
All right. Thanks so much, Marie-Andrée. And apologies if I'm a little fumbly here. I just saw these notes for the first time this morning. But as Marie-Andrée has shared with us, the Canadian story of the Canadian CS journey has had a lot of successes that we're really proud of, really excited to share with you. And we've had a lot of struggles and challenges and failures that we're also pretty excited to share with you. So in the spirit of failing forward, of creating this space that's safe to fail and safe to learn, we wanted to highlight some of those challenges for you. Maybe you've experienced some of the same things and you want to come tell us what worked for you. Maybe we're still working on some of these solutions together. So the three challenges that we really wanted to highlight: firstly, recognizing that trust doesn't happen overnight, maintaining engagement in the CS process, and finally showing conservation results. So one thing I think probably a lot of us, if not all of us, can relate to is this recognition that trust does not happen overnight. There's a lot of perceptions about the conservation standards. Not all of them are positive. I invite you to kind of pause and reflect on what your experience was the first time you heard about the conservation standards. You might have been like that person that was sitting next to me at dinner last night who was like, I've been looking for this my whole career, this is amazing. Or you might have been like, oh my gosh, another process, another new shiny tool I'm gonna have to learn and then forget about in 5 years. Regardless, you probably didn't make up your mind right away. Maybe if you're sitting here today, you would have had to have changed your mind if you trusted it eventually, but that change probably didn't happen overnight. So when we're introducing people to the conservation standards, we have to expect we're introducing them to the most skeptical version of themselves and trust that it might take a little bit of time for them to come around. It takes time to build trust in the process, but also to build trust in the people. CS adoption is not starting from a clean slate. Very rarely you're building on top of a whole lot of baggage. So we have to take into consideration the past and present relationships between people that are going to affect how the conservation standards has been perceived. So relationships between colleagues and teams, between the government and Indigenous peoples, NGOs and corporations. Something that's helping us is borrowing some language and philosophy from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada. which is reconciliation is a learning journey to establish and maintain respectful relationships with Indigenous peoples based on recognitions of rights, respect, and partnership. This takes time and intention, and we need to remember to be moving at the speed of trust, to include diverse perspectives and worldviews, and to make opportunities for co-leadership. Second area where we're struggling or continuing to struggle is with this concept of maintaining engagement. So I'm sure many of you have experienced this. You start a big process with a whole lot of enthusiasm and energy, and you're so excited to be doing the CS together. Woohoo! And then that enthusiasm starts to wane over time. You get stuck in the complexities and the weeds of a big, complicated project, and you find yourself just like not able to continue around the circle, to continue adapting and continue going. One thing that some of us in the Canadian Collective are exploring that might be helping is this concept of agile approaches. Many of us are really excited for this session that's going to be happening on Thursday. But the idea is these agile approaches, they're used all the time in successful software development, so it's really exciting that Conservation Standards is learning from this field. But using an agile approach, we can identify and prioritize the team's needs and break down the work so we can constantly deliver small, fast wins. We can show people that we're listening and making their lives easier, just one little piece of the puzzle at a time. And this is going to help maintain engagement over time more steadily than just one big exciting piece in the middle or at the beginning that starts to fade. Maintaining engagement also means using, building, and contributing to the conservation standards community. There's so much good work we can draw from, so much good lessons that we can contribute to. So continuing to that engagement can help with our own enthusiasm and energy and keep the process going. Finally, the last lesson we want to share with you, the last challenge that we're facing right now is showing conservation results. So it's good that we're trying to fully adopt the conservation standards and to show the effectiveness of it. But we have to remember where we started. So as we've seen earlier in this presentation, lots of collaborations are happening across the country using conservation standards. Those collaborations might have happened without the CS, but they would have spent a lot of time reinventing wheels, not learning from each other. Some of us might remember not too long ago, every new conservation plan you saw was completely different. But they were all pages and pages of text describing ecosystems, issues, socioeconomic statistics, and then a short list of actions. Charles notes that he thought his project plans were better, but now that he's thinking about it, they kind of sucked too. So in Canada, Conservation Standards has helped us to create this culture of adaptive management, this safe space where other teams can learn from each other. Some steps are now well understood and they're part of the way that we do things as a country, but we're really starting to expand our adoption of mid and long-term effectiveness monitoring. So trying to use our limited resources for long-term ecological monitoring really wisely, but possibly starting with like one low-hanging indicator, collaborating and using existing monitoring programs so we don't have to start fresh. One thing we're learning is that we need to celebrate every small success that we make. Being here together, working on a unified approach to conservation, building on the work of hundreds of people over the last 20 years is a big success and something we can really celebrate. So we want to take the time to congratulate ourselves just for being here today. And I hope that these challenges have maybe resonated with a bit of you, and maybe you can come up to us later and we can learn more together. To wrap us up, I'm going to introduce Brenda.
Thanks, Sarah. So in closing, in sharing our CS experiences, which is just one part of the pie here in Canada, we've touched on building capacity through collaboration, embracing flexibility and having an adaptive spirit, and improving practice by failing forward. And we're really looking forward to digging into these themes more deeply throughout the rally this week. So Canadians are known to be friendly and polite, and we are so thrilled to welcome the CCNet community to Canada. So we invite you to come up and say hello throughout the week, and we can tell you where to find the best maple syrup or what to do if you encounter a black bear or a cougar. And we, up on stage here, are just some of the friendly Canadians that are here at the rally. So if you are a friendly Canadian in the audience, maybe you can raise your hand and say hello, give a wave. Yeah, great. We have one last trivia question for you. So the highest tides in the world occur here in Canada. And where do they occur? Is it A, in the Georgia Strait here in beautiful British Columbia? So remember, raise your hand and make some noise if you think that's the answer. Is it B, the St. Lawrence Estuary in La Belle Province de Quebec? Is it C, in Ungava Bay in Nunavut? All right, we've got some for that one. Or is it D, the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick? All right. Awesome. Everyone knows the answer to that one. So it is, of course, the Bay of Fundy. And the Bay of Fundy, twice a day, cycles 1 billion tons of water through the tide, which is more than all of the fresh water in the world combined. And the differential between the tides can go up to 16 meters or 53 feet. So it's quite impressive. And of course, all of us who are on stage would also welcome folks to come up to us and chat if you related to our journey, if you want to hear more, if you want to brainstorm some solutions to challenges, or share your lessons learned with us. And we found in our experience that collaboration has really elevated and enabled conservation here in Canada. And we look forward to building a longer table as more individuals and communities, interest groups, and organizations come together in the spirit of ethical space to elevate and amplify conservation, not only here in Canada, but around the world. And we look forward to doing that with the international community this week. After all, a rising tide floats all boats. Thank you.